next guest is Claudia Perlich. She is the Chief Data Scientist from Dstillery, and she's going to be speaking to us about predictive marketing, promises, and pitfalls.
All right, I hope you guys all had a good cup of coffee before that, because true to myself, I'll be a little bit geeky. I spent 6 years up at IBM Watson, so it's just in my blood. I can't help it. But I hope I'll still kind of bring it across as to what it matters and how it works. Could I get my slides? Yeah, okay, here we go. So I actually changed the title slightly to Reality, Pitfalls, and Potential, because I do want to talk a little bit also about what I see coming and where this might be going. So predictive marketing, it's one of these terms that people started using recently, and I honestly don't really know what people mean when they say it, but I basically, thinking about what my personal take on predictive marketing is, it's really, from my perspective, bringing predictive modeling to talk about people as individuals. We're no longer talking about audiences in terms of their demographics or even their kind of behavioral patterns like soccer enthusiast, whatever you want to say, but it's really coming to the point of how do we interact with our consumers as individuals? Because face it, like it or not, that's what they expect from us. That's where we need to be in dealing with them. And the way this comes together in predictive marketing is where kind of my background is in predictive modeling. So I'll take the very high kind of the one slide introduction of what predictive modeling is, and whether you call it that or you call it AI, like where exactly the boundaries are, is hard to tell. But it really comes down to you collect a lot of data and then you hand it to a machine and say, go and learn something from the data. Figure it out. I don't want to have to deal with it. I don't want to have to look at it in an Excel spreadsheet and try to understand why people do what they do. Leave it to the machine to figure things out. So here's a simple example is, can you predict who will buy an insurance? Well, you need to have data on who bought insurance before. So every point here is basically a person, and I know exactly two things about them. I only know income and age. You see clearly there is some relationship, but I don't want to have to look at it. I'm asking simply a machine, go and find out what best represents the relationship between the things I know about people and how they responded, what I'm really interested in. So in particular, there's one of these old tools that has been around for 50 years, so this is no new science by all means. Find a line. The whole point of this line is, and this is just a couple of parameters, so this is my geeky part, we're almost done. Once I have that, I can use it to predict. So it comes in a new person, and I want to know how likely are they to be interested in this offer that I have. And I just ask the machine, and the machine comes back and says, probability that they'll buy insurance is 0.53. Now you do what you want with it, but it tells you something about what people will do in the future. And it's then up to us to figure out how we utilize that for marketing. Now, of course, that example I could have shown you 20 years ago. Now we go big data, which really just means we know so much more about what people do. We know more than demographics. We know where they go because the mobile devices tell us where they have been. We know what pages they read online. We know what apps they use and when. All this information now comes together, and basically we just build the same thing, but with a lot more information. So the technology has scaled up, and as a result, the predictions just got a lot better. It's actually gotten a lot easier to predict what people will do. What's the power of prediction? Well, if I just knew who was very likely to buy a product, well, an old way of referring to a person is they're in the market, right? So if I know people are likely to be interested in a product, that's probably the right time to target them. So the targeting now basically means you pick individuals one by one that have very high predictions from one of these machines that did something with all of the data. Trust the machine to find people who are the highest propensity of taking the action you're interested in, so you just have to nudge them. So in here, the power of prediction, I'm comparing all of the black point, every point here is a group of people, but they're not audiences in the traditional sense. I'm just picking people that the machine said are in the market, have very high propensities. And you see the scale on the x-axis, and on the y-axis it's performance, meaning do the people then actually buy? What is the conversion rate of this group? And this is the group I can predict. These are people that the machine identified, looking at millions of data points to forecast what they will do in the next 7 days. The retargeting is the blue point out there, which is a small opportunity, but these are all prospects that haven't bought yet. And if you look at the red points at the bottom, these are kind of conventional third-party segments that are behavioral segments or demographic segments. So this is generic. This is not specific to the product. And you see a vast difference in the ability of a machine to pick the right person, one by one, as individuals, based on their past behavior. Now, there's a lot more I can predict. The reality is the machine understands nothing about the product. It can't tell the difference between a credit card and an insurance or a pizza. To the machine, none of this really matters. I'm always asking the same question. Can you predict whether the person will take that action? But what that action is to the machine is irrelevant. So we can predict whether a person will download an app. We can predict whether people will go to a car dealership. You can predict if people are going to move. I can predict which of your customers is going to churn, one by one. And if I really have to, and you force me, I can even predict whether in a report from OCR report, this person thinks of himself as either female or male. All of these things use the exact same machinery and the information behind it. So this is kind of the reality, what we can do already today in using prediction for smart decisioning around who we target, audiences of size 1, individuals. Let's talk about the problem. And I was contemplating putting a slide here, a picture of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So my typical one is, with great data comes great responsibility. There are a lot of things you really don't want me to predict. I can, if you force me to, but I recommend against. And that brings us into the world of metrics. There are a lot of different metrics in advertising that we rely on when making decisions about what strategy is working or not. And a lot of them don't capture the real thing. They're just proxies for something that's really hard to measure. My favorite example here is people clicking on ads. That is a metric that has been used extensively. I can certainly predict who will click on ads. Please don't make me. The reason is the vast majority of clicks here don't really mean that the person is interested in the product. Let's not fool ourselves. But for some circumstantial reasons, they accidentally clicked. You see here the click rate is pretty constant no matter what the product. The post-click conversion rate is not only 2 orders of magnitude lower, but also very different. So that leads me to believe there's a lot going on with clicks that isn't representative of what we are interested in, meaning intent. Now, why is it a problem? Well, it turns out I can predict accidental clicks a lot better than intentional ones. My machine will figure out why people click accidentally. Eyesight problems, very bad fine motor skills. It's a dark environment, or you're not paying attention because you're very focused on something else. So if I use my machine, and this is kind of a histogram of my predictions, all of the things that have a very high probability to click, they're all accidental. Because predicting people who click on purpose is really hard. And so in the end, if you force me to run a campaign to optimize click-through rate, I will only show it to people who are really not interested in your product. That's the way I stay on the plan, right? So one example of this is, what I mean by contextual, is the dirty secret of running a really, really successful click-through campaign on mobile. Just show the ad on the flashlight app. It's people fumbling in the dark. No matter what the product, you consistently see the by far highest click-through rates in flashlight apps and various games that probably people not really paying attention and click all over the place. So yes, my machine can find out a lot more from this data than you intended. And if I then use it to optimize, the results might be very counterproductive to what we really have in mind. Here's a comparison where we actually look at the correlation. If I let my machine loose on clicks, and then I measure how well that machine actually predicts purchases, it's basically no better than random. You don't need to hire me. You can just go out there and do yours. So the point being, beware what you ask for when you let modern machine and machine learning loose in predictive modeling on marketing problems where the metric we're looking at is not foolproof. Another more devious example is bot traffic. You all have heard about this, I'm sure. I don't need to go into this. The problem has become that bots are starting to visit conversion events. They behave like converters. The reason is, of course, that makes them more attractive in terms of targeting them. So bots, we now see a lot of traffic going to brands' homepages. We also see them fill out forms, doing all kinds of stuff that we're interested in. The worst offender by far in terms of bot traffic is where the money is, and that's in video. So video completes, the only ones who consistently have the patience to sit through all of these ads are bots. If you measure me and you force me to target people who have a very high patience, I will only reach bots. So the reason is bots are really easy to predict. Turns out they don't have free will. They always do their thing. Much harder to figure out which person is really interested. So all the very, very high predictions I'm getting for probability of view-through, for instance, is going to be a bot. And these then are the ones I'm going to target given the metric. So these were my two tales of caution. Let's talk a little bit about where I see the potential to go beyond what we already had in terms of audience selection. This is a recent experiment that we did with a partner here that really goes beyond the question, who's the right person? But given that I know you're the right person, what is the right way to talk to you? And can we do kind of the same trick with machinery and data to learn which individual is likely to respond best to which specific creative? So this is not about designing creatives, but this is about, given some, I don't know, 20 creatives, can you pick in real time, in programmatic, which message is the right one to show to that individual? So this is a study we did with Giovanni where we measure whether after seeing an ad, people actually buy the product. So that's an integration with Kantar where we literally look at the product moving. And this is just some global estimates looking at the different creatives, and clearly some of them perform much better than others. So the one on the left did actually slightly worse than nothing, but no statistics. The clearly globally most successful creative is to fuel yourself. But that doesn't really yet speak to the question who responds how to which of these creatives. But the machine can learn that too. So in particular, I can predict how will you react if I show you this ad, number 1. I can use these machines to get predictions for every single creative. And now the size of the creatives is kind of the effect that the model predicts. What about the next creative? Well, it turns out you really wouldn't want to respond to that one. The prediction of the model says the probability of converting after seeing that ad is lower. So I can build 20 of these machines that predict for every of these 20 creatives what is my expected probability of you then going and buy. And I can, in the end, choose to show this creative because the machines that have learned to predict human behavior have also learned that with all the information I know about this person, this has the highest probability. So this is, as a vision moving forward, how real-time decisioning can not only pick audiences of size 1, individuals one by one, but also then from a limited set of creatives choose which one is the most effective and show those. And I realize I am far too fast. I guess I made up some of your time then. So I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Hi, you mentioned that you worked for IBM.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you have put the power of Watson behind this?
No, and Watson will not help you here. Watson is, there is a piece of Watson that is exactly this. There is a piece of Watson that is predictive. That's the very end part. So I'm talking of the Watson that won Jeopardy. I'm not talking of all the other Watsons that are out there now doing all kinds of things. Watson learned. Watson was actually trained on all existing Jeopardy games ever played. So it played historically all of those, and it learned exactly how we did here in the data, when it was right and when it was wrong. And it used the kind of logistic regression idea to readjust its belief in different hypotheses. So Watson creates millions of hypotheses, and then it had to learn which of the sources of data were more reliable than others. And that piece used exactly this technology. Predictive modeling was at the very end of tuning kind of its belief into its information.
I understand how you achieve all of the signals from that person on the screen, but how do you know that she converted in the real world to buying the yogurt?
So the integration we have with Kantar, we worked with Kantar in an integration where we match the Shopcom data back to the cookie that we expose to an ad.
Shopping data from credit cards.
I don't know exactly how Shopcom, I think it's some kind of a loyalty program. So there's a loyalty program where people, it's like scanner data. So you have for a certain size population, not the whole world, but a certain size population, you know exactly what they bought. And this is called, we have an integration to that from Kantar that allows us to tie it back from the, whatever they sign up with, probably an email or an address, whatever, to the corresponding cookie, which is how all of the digital delivery was handled. So it's, again, on the individual level. It's not an aggregate. It is, we know we showed an ad to that person. In fact, we know we showed ad number 3 to that person, and then we can see and wait whether within the next 7 days, the Shopcom data shows that indeed they purchased the product.
So back to the earlier panel on all the AI, facial recognition, et cetera, you do know exactly who this person is offline and online.
The reality is, in the online space, I know your virtual existence. I don't know your name. I don't know your address. I only tie together kind of the virtual traces. Now, truth be told, somebody somewhere must know something, so I'm not saying that's not the case. So the only way this tying together works, but usually you just hire a third party, so it's their problem. So there are third parties whose job it is to kind of do this connector. The way it looks to me, I only have a 20-digit random number assigned to your browser. If you have 2 browsers, you're 2 people. And if your son uses your computer, you're bipolar.
But my anonymous persona online is then connected to my real-life persona with that offline data. Yes, or
again,
you would know.
There are vendors who provide that service who connect these data sets together.
And also the generic purchasing that you had in the one graph that has the lower results has also a lower cost of creation associated with it. We kind of guess at creative and find something that meets maybe more than one personality.
You mean this one?
Yes. So no, actually the scatter diagram you had earlier where you were showing the productivity of generic versus
that one, yes.
Retargeting,
this actually has nothing to do with causality. The original one is only, can I predict whether people will buy something anyway? There's no media shown in this one. It's just showing how well I can identify who's likely to buy. There's no, can be done without media. I can give you this information pre-campaign.
And so traditionally, this is how campaigns were kind of run, by demographics or by associative indicators.
So you have those
but the
things.
cost of creating those campaigns was much lower. So is there any sense of how much more productive the prospecting, targeting, along with all the additional creative and execution expenses has to be in order to be more cost effective in general?
Right. So I'm not entirely sure that they were really cheaper, because you still need to buy third-party data on this demographic information. In terms of the effect, I mean, here we talk about an order of magnitude. It's roughly a factor of 10 that we have higher conversion rates in those. Now, this is not always the case. There are certainly examples where you see some of these demographics really standing out. But, I mean, just thinking about it personally, yes, I'm a middle-aged soccer mom. Technically, I cannot refute this. I do wish to believe that there's a lot more to me that determines what I do and don't do than any of those buckets you can possibly, kind of hats you can put on me. So I would say realistically, yes, factor of 5 to 10 is very easily achieved in terms of finding the right audiences. You still have to move them. That goes to the second part, because right here, I'm just saying I can find people who are in the market. The hard part is still making the creative change my already high attitude towards the purchase.
Are there signals that you found are better for predicting who's going to be the highest quality, so purchase behavior versus browsing versus?
So you're asking what kind of signals we find?
Yeah, or even any specific ones that you've seen.
Okay. So very consistent. You very often see price shopping activity. If there's anything out there that you can price shop for, people price shop. Shouldn't come as a surprise at all. It's just that my model sees it and kind of in real time takes advantage of the fact that right now we see it. We have seen also, for instance, people signing up for Angie's List. You see, actually, they go to do-it-yourself pages about a week before, and then they give up and realize that maybe they need to hire somebody. So often it makes kind of for interesting stories. But the reality is translating what these million-dimensional, I'm not joking, models actually find back into something I can tell you is anecdotal at best, and it's not exactly trivial. So it's really, really hard to understand. Sometimes great stories come out. Often it's a little harder to come back with these bits of information.
The issue to me seems that the process of creation is still very arbitrary, right? So the set of Chobani ads you showed, it's totally random, and it's mandated by the fact that my client is telling me the logo needs to be this big and I need to have raspberries on, in 3 of them. And so how far are we from getting to the point where how likely I am to purchase is also, the computer is also able to give me proactive suggestions. So half of your audience is really into the fact that this is Greek, and your other half of your audience, like something else. I don't know.
I mean, this is almost coming back to the earlier question. Once you understand what people do before purchase and the different things that different people do, that could give you a hint. The reality is, even with big data, I can't create infinitely many possible creatives. This right now relies on the fact that you only give me 20 that I can actually learn from, because I first have to collect the data, right? So I cannot speculate about what happens with creatives that haven't never been shown yet, or that have only been shown to 3 people. So a requirement for this is to have enough training data for the machine to actually find something. So I think in that sense, that's not something the machine can do. The machine can tell you something about the people, and it still remains a creative process to then kind of utilize that information and have a next layer of experimentation like that one to see, well, did I learn the right things? Does it really work better? So I think we will never take over the creative part. We can try colors, maybe, but this is kind of any real interesting things like the human creativity and how to speak to your consumers. We will not take that over. I can't foresee that in the 10 years. By the way, I'm not sure when I'm supposed to leave the stage. Just kick me out, right? Well, I guess no questions would do it too.
like say if they say we want to run 3 creatives, could you in advance divide the audience along 3 lines that were the most distinct, segments within the audience?
So what I'm saying is I can predict in advance who will respond to what. I just need to first collect the data to do so. So that step you can't get around. And by the way, it works great for yogurt because, I don't know, about 30% of the population eats yogurt. This thing doesn't work very well for buying luxury cars because I just don't get enough data to learn any signal from it. So you need first this kind of experimentation step where you collect the information that then the machines can learn from, and then they can predict for the rest of the world. And you only need to do this for a small part of the population, as long as it's random, and then you can scale the campaign to everybody. Or you can even use it, we have seen results. There was another one, and Come Back Better, there was this message, worked great for people who work out at Equinox. YCMA, not so much. So you can actually have it inform like completely different parts of your campaigns, whether this is out of home or, so I think the insights you derive from here can go much further than just running yet another display campaign. Feel free to contact me, so my contact information is here. If you want to follow up on any of that or have more questions, I'd be very happy to respond either through LinkedIn or email. Thank you very much.